Hello, everybody, and welcome. First of all, I just want to say thank you to all of you for coming out. I know walking through that front door is hard when we're dealing with grief and mourning, so I just want to acknowledge all of you for taking that step and reaching out. So, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Kirsten Gaucher, and I'm the owner of Zenful Spas here in town. You're probably asking yourself, why is the owner of a spa here doing a talk about death? Well, naturally, I'm going to tell you. This past November, I lost my dad and my great aunt within a 24-hour period. Then 2 days later, I got a call from the doctor letting me know that there was a probable Down syndrome diagnosis for my daughter that I was currently pregnant with at the time. January 4th, I received further testing, at which point I was told that my child was not compatible with life. So I wanted to keep believing in miracles and hoping that this would all plan out, and so I just kept going, right? But inevitably, 5 days later, we discovered that her heart had stopped beating. I delivered my daughter, Lakin Fawn, on January 10th, 2018. I was 5 months pregnant at the time. So one of the things that I've discovered throughout my journey is this term called disenfranchised death. And what that means, that's kind of, society views that as different. Little stigma around it, a little bit of taboo, right? What those include is any death that is kind of out of the ordinary, like deaths that are peri or postnatal, or suicides, or situations where there's a tendency to blame the victim, like when someone dies of liver failure, but they were a heavy drinker, right? Whereas normal deaths are considered as like accidental or homicidal, or maybe caused by a terminal illness like cancer, but in a non-smoker. So there's a little bit of differences when you're talking about deaths, and I knew nothing about this until I was exposed to it. So what finding this out meant for me is that what I was feeling was normal. Okay, that's huge, this feeling of normalcy. I had heard many of the cliches like, this is God's way, you can just have another baby, thank goodness you have other children. But my response was that I didn't want to have another baby. I wanted this baby, the one I lost. Perhaps they didn't understand that the second I saw that plus sign show up on that little plastic stick, I was going to be a mom again. And this was a child to me, someone I had hopes and dreams and a future planned for, until that was all taken away from me. So not only was I grieving the loss itself, but I was also grieving the future that we would never have. I think a lot of us here today are connected in that way. We grieve the ones we've lost, no matter how much time we had with them, and we grieve all the things that we will never have or will never have ever again. So right after we buried Lakin, our family cat had passed away as well. So although it may seem small in comparison, I loved that cat. And losing him meant one more loss that I would have to contend with. So now, after having lost 4 spirits in my life, I knew that I needed help, and I couldn't do this alone, nor should I. Talking to friends and family helped, but I needed professional guidance. I was so fortunate because my sister had been able to book me in with a counselor, but I had to wait a few months to see her. After I had seen her, it was really great, but I struggled to rebook. And I couldn't find a lot of other resources, and there was a really long waiting period, about 6 to 8 months I was told to talk to mental health. And I thought I couldn't wait that long. You know, I had completely lost my sense of purpose, my sense of self, and my identity. So I did eventually find a counselor in Edmonton that I do still talk to weekly, and that has helped enormously in the healing process and assisted me when I experienced triggers that are inevitable with any loss. So my goal now is to show the world my vulnerability in the hopes that the world will be open enough to share theirs with me. I had posted my experience on social media, mostly so that I wouldn't have to retell the same story to every client, and also to explain that no, I was not in Mexico making a spa there, as I had told people I wanted to do. But the response I received from the community was unbelievable. The support and the love was humbling, to say the least. My inbox was flooded with not just love and support, but also messages from people reaching out because they themselves were also grieving and they had nowhere to go and nowhere to turn to. So I was determined that I would help them some way, somehow. So that's when I decided that since I couldn't find the resources or that they were already so taxed, I would take the classes so that I could provide the additional support within the community and around the globe. So I went out and got my certifications in life coaching and grief mentoring, and that's kind of how I ended up here. I've had Lakin's footprints tattooed on my arm with a saying that said, "There's no footprint so small that it does not leave an imprint on this world," to serve as a reminder to me that my daughter never even took a breath of air, and she completely transformed my life. And so my hope is to be able to help other people on their journey, wherever they may be, and that is Lakin's legacy. So, now that you know a little bit about me and why I got into the work that I'm in now, I would like to share the 3 life lessons that I have learned from death. There are many more than just 3, but these are ones that inevitably at some point we all, in my experience, have to deal with. So first and foremost is allow yourself some grace. When someone we love has been taken from us, we are immediately faced with the multitude of emotions. We feel disbelief, sadness, hopelessness, anger, guilt, among a ton of other ones, whatever they may be. And sorry, I got sidetracked there. So what we must first learn through our journey with death is that we must allow ourselves grace. We just need to allow ourselves time to acknowledge these feelings. Whatever they may be, they may change every single day, but just know that there are no right or wrong feelings, okay? I'll say that again. There are no right or wrong feelings when it comes to dealing with grief and mourning. There's no such thing anymore as black and white or good and evil. This whole grief and mourning is one big sea of gray. So grief and mourning can kind of cause sort of a foggy haze in our minds. Maybe we question, is this really how I feel about this, or is that the grief talking? Death brings with it a very confusing new world, and some days all we can do is just breathe. And just know, breathing is enough. Okay? It's so important that we talk through our grief and mourning and to talk about what we're experiencing, what we're feeling, our fears, our insecurities. Just saying the person's name that we lost will bring an entire host of emotions. Some people find it comforting that others acknowledge the one that they lost. For others, that will just be a trigger for them, and they would prefer not hearing that name for a while. Again, totally fine, and your feelings are valid, okay? Let's talk about validation for a moment. We need to sense that what we're feeling is valid. It's okay if you hate people right now, and you're angry at them because their life goes on, and your world has completely crumbled. Those are all valid emotions. You know, and when we're dealing with grief, we often feel like, or we're told by well-meaning friends and family, that we should be getting over it and that our loved one is in a better place, or that everything happens for a reason. All those things may be true, but in our grief, those are exactly the words that we do not want to hear, okay? Because the best place for our loved one to be is with us right now. So if you're here because you're supporting somebody in their grief and mourning, please, please do not say those things to them. What they really need from you is just somebody to listen to how they're feeling, a shoulder to cry on. Grievers are not looking for somebody to fix them because they are not broken. Their world is broken, shattered into a million tiny pieces. Ask them what they need from you. Offer to help them in some way, or ask them if they like hearing their loved one's name. For me, hearing people say Lakin was and still is music to my ears. It means so much to me than people will ever realize. And I just want to bring this into another one. When you're allowing yourself grace and space to experience your feelings, allow some grace for other people too. A lot of times they don't know how to react. People don't know what to do, what to say to comfort you. So allow them grace to do that. I'll give you an example. When we were burying Lakin, and I showed up at the graveyard, and the priest says to me, "Oh, are you the mother?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And he's, "Oh, I'm so sorry about your loss." And that was very nice, very heartfelt. Thank you. I appreciate that. And he says, "But good thing you're young. You can just have another one." He said this to me at my daughter's funeral. I wanted to push him in Lakin's grave. Just boop, see ya, right? I mean, obviously that was all I wanted to do. I didn't, in case you're wondering, because I reminded myself that he didn't really mean to say that out of being cold-hearted, okay? He was trying to be supportive and trying to help. So I just remembered that, and I just held that within me, that he didn't mean to be cruel. He was trying to help. And so when you're dealing with other people, take that into account when you feel like maybe they've said something that hurt you, okay? Just consider they are trying to do the best they can too. So when you're allowing yourself grace and permission to feel exactly the way that you're feeling, as I said before, it needs to be expressed. Holding in our thoughts and feelings about the situation now means that we will have to deal with them at some point in the future. Sooner or later, we must grieve. Writing your thoughts in a journal, talking to those we love are both great ways to express our grief and get it out of our heads. That is healing. Sometimes talking to the people we love can be difficult, as they themselves are also processing the grief of the loss. We can begin to feel as though we are a burden, so we don't express our needs, and then we begin to feel isolated and alone. This is where talking to someone outside of your circle can be a powerful healing tool. This is where speaking with a counselor, a spiritual advisor, or a grief mentor like myself, or if there's others out there, can help you. When you go outside your circle and you bring these people in, they're holding space for you. You can speak to them about everything you're feeling and not be worried that you're being burdensome to them. This eases the isolation that we often feel, and it makes us feel validated, okay? Okay, so I know that was a big one, allowing grace for yourself, but because it's so important. The second thing that I've learned through death is that it causes us to evaluate our lives. Death has a way of making us look at the way we're living ourselves. As time goes on, we begin to ask ourselves some very important soul questions. What people are we surrounding ourselves with? Do we love our career? Do we feel as though we're truly living our life's purpose? We're reminded now that life is short. If it is possible for our loved one to pass away, it's more than possible for us to also live our last day. And that's terrifying, right? So not only are we now grieving and mourning, but now we're evaluating our own lives. Are we living life to its fullest? We begin to see all sorts of beautiful things, and we look at them in different ways. The colors of a sunset or a sunrise. We no longer take our time with our loved ones for granted. We enjoy every moment. Losing a loved one is hard, so hard. We cannot begin to imagine our futures without our loved one's physical presence. We'll be spending our days remembering the impact that that person left on us and wonder what legacy that we ourselves will leave. As we spend our time taking stock of our own lives, asking questions and really doing some serious soul work, we begin seeing aspects of our lives that we no longer wish for. We no longer want to dread getting up another day, promising ourselves, this is the day I make positive changes, or this is the day I take that risk. And then we don't follow through. We're scared now. We're scared because unless we actually start taking real steps towards our goals, we're afraid we may never reach them before our time is up. So we shift our mindset and we really sit down with ourselves and we ask, what is it that will truly make me happy? We make a list of all of our hopes and dreams, and maybe we pull that list that's been collecting dust on the journal on your bookshelf. We look at the list and we make a promise to ourselves that this time will be different. Because this time we're motivated. We're too scared now to die with our lists missing check marks of achievement. We make an action plan and actually start checking things off. Our self-esteem is rising, and we become more sure of ourselves and more in love with ourselves. The third thing we need to do is we have to create a new life. When we lose someone, our lives are immediately separated into two categories, before and after. Life no longer makes sense, it's unfair and unjust. Your life has been impacted by the one that you lost. And although I know we would all trade anything to have our loved one back, we can't. Part of us has died with them. So now we have to create a new life, a new self, a new identity. We have to create our after. We begin to rebuild our lives, not by ever moving on, because I don't think we ever do, but by moving forward. After our experience with death, we're now wanting to live our lives with more purpose, more truth, more love. We want to live our lives on purpose now. We're forced to evaluate our lives and to live a new life. And when we feel like giving up, we must take the steps that our loved one never will again. All we can do is move forward with our lives and with love and gratitude, thank our loved one for all they did to enhance our lives while they were here with us. And for showing us just how much strength and resilience that we had inside ourselves all along. When the people we love become a memory, that memory becomes a treasure.